This next era can perhaps be thought of as the Archie Goodwin era, but that's fudging things a bit. Goodwin wrote, all told, 8 issues in this overall period, joined by a series of fill-in writers until the next real era of the Hulk began. That isn't to say that nothing happened in this. Goodwin did have something in mind, but it was more or less just a single story arc idea whose conclusion essentially marked the end of his brief run on the book. Goodwin was primarily known at this time for writing Iron Man. When Tales of Suspense changed to Captain America, he wrote the Iron Man story of the Iron Man and Submariner #1 issue, since their stories were incomplete, remember. And as noted, Iron Man's story still wasn't resolved, and Goodwin started Iron Man #1 picking up from a cliffhanger. But he would continue to write the character for more than 2 years, and then a little later, after a 4-issue fill-in on, appropriately, the Fantastic Four, Goodwin had the job of helping to keep the Hulk going, with Roy Thomas taking over greater responsibilities at Marvel. We'll be covering everyone in this period from after Thompson stopped writing until just before Steve Englehart would take over, as well as the last Defenders issue for Marvel Features, issue #3, which will actually be relevant in our other look at the Hulk, Immortal, which is further down the line, though. But now, let's begin with the Incredible Hulk 145, where Len Wein writes the fill-in issue to Roy Thomas's notes. This issue starts in Earth's distant past as an alien craft arrives, and beings that text describes as gods bury something deep in the earth before leaving. In the present, the Hulk has escaped from Doctor Doom's hold and cuts a path of unintended destruction on his way to the sea. But we can understand why he mistrusts humanity, as a Russian destroyer spots him and moves in to make the kill. After sinking the destroyer, he arrives in the Sahara, witnessing men in chariots chasing down a woman. At first dismissive, he's reminded of Betty and steps in, only she's outraged because they're filming a movie and he just blew the take. But after calming him enough not to make things worse, they plan to fit the Hulk into their movie. Elsewhere, we begin what will be an ongoing setting, Project Greenskin. In this detailed breakdown, Project Greenskin is to be headquartered at a site that is dedicated specifically to hunting down the Hulk. This, incidentally, was Herb Trimpe's thing. He's the artist on the book and came up with it all, including the fact that it looks like a peace sign. Betty is outraged over her father's plans, as this might even mean killing Bruce. But at the moment, the Hulk is so tired that before his scene can be shot, he turns back into Banner. He wants nothing to do with their film, but after the others leave, the aliens from the beginning are revealed to be here, posing as statues. They look like the gods of the ancient Egyptians, but they're here because the seeds they've planted are now ready, so they can have the massive gladiatorial game here on Earth. Soon a huge stone being called the Colossus rises up out of the ground, and the Sphinx itself comes to life. Banner steals the helmet off one of the aliens, though, and destroys the Sphinx's life force, restoring it to normal, but the strain releases the Hulk. Seeing this as hopeless, the aliens beam the Hulk down to the planet, where he proceeds to beat up the Colossus when it menaces that actress. The Hulk smashes the Colossus to pieces and buries it under the desert, where it can't harm anyone. Issue 146, then, is written by Jerry Conway. It picks up with the Hulk escaping across the desert, while General Ross, Betty, Doc Samson, and Jim watch the construction of Project Greenskin. But the sight of it convinces Jim that it's time to leave. Ross is wound up tight because the president is coming, even laying into Doc Samson and snapping at Major Talbot for being gone, before being reminded he was gone to prepare for the president's arrival, like General Ross had told him to. Jim is not given a friendly goodbye either, but what's weird is the driver assigned to him is driving kind of wild and pulls a gun on him. Jim resists, but the driver is shot in the head by his own ricochet and the car goes off the cliff. Luckily, Jim survived and learns the driver was a robot. Ross is aghast when he finds out what Jim's been through, but Jim thinks Ross might actually be in on it. Crawling back inside, he finds Richard Nixon and VP Spiro Agnew trapped in giant tubes. Well, these are actually androids also, as is Ross and Talbot, all built by the Leader, who tosses Jim in the same place with them in anticipation of the real president and VP's arrival. During all of this, the Hulk has been caught in a sandstorm, but finally someone arrives, a female soldier. He pursues and runs right into the Israeli army, where he smashes them up for a while before heading to the runway and riding on the outside of a jet. Apparently, though, this is actually all part of a plan. In issue 147, the real Nixon and Agnew have arrived and are waiting as the plane from Tel Aviv with the Hulk riding on the outside shows up. They've got a sonic cannon to deal with him, and it's severely disorienting to the Hulk. Betty's horrified, but when she goes to confront her father, the jig is up, and he knocks her out. The Hulk breaks inside, though, destroying the robot and saving Betty, while Doc Samson reveals that he's known all along. He's just been waiting for the Hulk to arrive to deal with it. And it's big. The leader forms an army of humanoids into a giant under his mental control, and begins bombarding the Hulk with gamma rays, trying to overdose him. But Doc Samson gets in the way to shield him, and the feedback knocks the leader out, leaving the Hulk free to now attack the giant. He wins, but the blast of gamma has returned Doc Samson back to normal, and the Hulk leaves, upset that they've all been ignoring him. An ironic situation for someone who says he wants to be left alone. Given the prominence of the character down the line, this is, in hindsight, a surprising turn. In a little less than 4 years, Doc Samson will return, regain his powers, and be present almost constantly in the book for many years to come. The reason, though, is likely because his presence is a disruption to the already existing love triangle with Betty, Bruce, and Major Talbot. So we'll just have to wait for when he comes back and see whether or not that absurd strength related to his hair length thing will be kept. Doc Samson may be Jewish, but I doubt very much his powers are because he's a Nazarite. With issue 148, Archie Goodwin, with plot assistance from Chris Claremont, took over as writer, and from the beginning you can see what he was interested in doing here, revisiting the idea of Jarella's world and the fact that she is likewise a disruption to the Bruce Banner Betty Ross dynamic. Project Greenskin is still being pursued, but Peter Corbeau, a physicist, has been brought in. He has a way to perhaps cure Banner using an orbiting solar reactor, but they'll need to catch him first. That's what the Hulkbusters are for, various aircraft designed by Stark Enterprises specifically for Project Greenskin. Caught off guard, the Hulk is knocked out. At the same time, in Jarella's microscopic land, her people are threatened by Lord Vizis, the guy that was sent into exile when the Hulk was here. Now Vizis has returned, and her warriors are slowly whittled down until she must fight alone, wishing her love were here in this dark hour. She goes to Torla the Sorcerer in the hopes that they can return him here, while in our world the probe works in turning Banner back. But the sun is acting strange now. While they investigate, Bruce is visited by Jarella, unaware that Vizis sent an assassin to ride the spell to our world as well. Before he can strike, Bruce and Jarella are whisked back to Project Greenskin, because between the gamma rays and the spell tearing reality open, the sun is going to nova. To fix it, S.H.I.E.L.D. has made a life model decoy of Jarella to send back, keeping stability between the two realms. Only the assassin arrives and begins shooting the guards as he works to get to Jarella, so Bruce goes to the chamber to reverse the process and bring the Hulk back to deal with him. Having finally been reunited with the one woman who loved him, the Hulk is taken aback. So when the assassin creates an explosion that kills her, the outraged Hulk tosses the assassin into the very fire he'd created. Fortunately, that Jarella was actually the LMD, but it means Jarella will need to return to maintain stability. The Hulk is incensed that he's going to lose her again, but he's stunned back into unconsciousness, and they're back to deciding what to do with him, leading to issue 149. Now that the Hulk is in Project Greenskin, he's been outfitted with a medpack manacle to be injected with tranquilizers so he'll stay docile. While Betty reflects on that, a shooting star is revealed to have carried a being to Earth. I'd say an alien, but the being claims that this is supposed to be his world. He calls himself the Inheritor, but he'll have to wait as the Hulk has managed to pull out the injector and worked on tearing through the wall in his desperation to try to find Jarella again. But behind the wall is knockout gas, and the amount is so great it not only knocks out the Hulk, but finally turns him back into Banner. Talbot and Ross, on the more sympathetic side of the spectrum right now, say that Project Greenskin isn't just a place to keep the Hulk contained. There's a radiation lab with top scientists. Bruce can lead them in working to find a cure, but he puts this rig on so that if there's the slightest sign that he's going to turn, he can be put back into containment. Meanwhile, the Inheritor has come across a truck with radioactive material. An exposure awakens a racial memory of his kind, watching for 300 million years as other species rose and fell in their domination of the planet, while his kind bided their time. The desire to learn more draws him to the radiation of Project Greenskin. He passes through their defenses, collapses equipment on Banner, but reaches the radiation, where he learns the truth. He is a product of the High Evolutionary, whom we got into more detail with over in From Here to Infinity. If you saw that, you know the High Evolutionary used a code of chivalry to keep his creations from getting out of control, but the Inheritor refused and was thus banished. Without doses of radiation, the Inheritor was beginning to revert back to his original state. But now he's drawn out the Hulk, and a fight breaks out, but in the end the Hulk tosses the Inheritor back into the chamber where they'd all started. That's then that the Inheritor makes a fatal mistake, heading into what he thinks is a radiation chamber when it's meant to draw radiation away. The Inheritor thus reverts to its natural form, a cockroach. As a sign of how the Hulk was just this book that was being passed around, issue 150 is nothing special at all. Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Avengers, all of them had marked that occasion, but right now the Hulk is just existing from month to month. In this issue, the Hulk hides after tossing away the cockroach that used to be the Inheritor, but soon a fight with the soldiers breaks out, and tranq gas is used against him. But this time the Hulk is able to figure out that the masks keep the others safe from its effects. It takes one off one of them who has already been knocked out, so he doesn't need it. The Hulk escapes, but is found the next morning on a mesa, but they can't bring him in this time. In part, that's because Ross has been called to Washington because there are congressional hearings on Project Greenskin and the enormous waste of money that it is. While they debate, the Hulk is in pursuit of a girl in a convertible who has green hair, presuming that this must be Jarella. He trashes part of a biker gang that's been trying to chase her down, but the surprising thing is that when he catches up, their bikes are destroyed before he's even arrived, and the girl is gone. Turns out the girl is actually Lorna Dane, aka Polaris, who is meeting Havoc out here to discuss returning to the X-Men, but he doesn't want to after what's happened, after the confrontation with Iceman over their feelings for Polaris. I try to keep this series a bit more on the serious side, but it is very amusing that the entire plot of this is essentially Polaris is so attractive, everyone wants to have her. A mutant recluse, a biker gang, a rage monster, even a gay man. They are all willing to fight to have the privilege of being with her. I know her power is attraction, I just didn't know it was in this way. So the Hulk arrives, forcing Havoc to go inside to change. His costume helps him gauge his powers, see, so it's kind of irresponsible if he uses them without having that on. However, that delay allows the Hulk to leave with Polaris. The Hulk soon realizes he was mistaken, but being the Hulk, he presumes that it wasn't him mistaking some innocent for Jarella, it was Polaris trying to trick him. Luckily, Havoc shows up to distract him, but unluckily, the Hulk plans to smash Havoc with part of the mesa, the part that Polaris is standing on. Havoc has to control his power like never before to hurt the Hulk enough to force him to listen and carefully put down the rock. Havoc is able to save Polaris while the Hulk passes out and changes back to Banner, and is soon found by Talbot and Betty. Only Bruce refers to Jarella as his love, which breaks Betty's heart. I think this really shows how difficult it is for writers to decide what to do with the Hulk sometimes. In his own anniversary book, the story is about the personal journey of a character totally unrelated to the Hulk in any way, and only peripherally with the Hulk himself. Now, certainly that's not isolated, especially back in some of Stan Lee's later Hulk stories, but if any character should have a personal milestone in issue 150 of The Incredible Hulk, it should probably be the Incredible Hulk, or if not, one of his entourage. Of course, I should probably also mention that this issue is taking place during the wilderness years of the X-Men. Havoc and Polaris haven't been seen since X-Men 66, when the Hulk crossed over with them, and also the last issue of that book that wasn't a reprint for the next 5 years. And these characters wouldn't be seen again until Captain America 174 2 years later. Then when the X-Men finally did get their own series again, those two had to leave. So I guess Archie Goodwin had a Havoc story that he wanted to tell and thus decided this would be a good place to put it. Issue 151 then picks up with Betty and Talbot leaving Banner in the desert, her upset about his confession, him upset with himself for hurting her. The frustration drives him to change, and the Hulk pursues, only to see Betty and Talbot kissing, prompting the Hulk to quietly depart. In Washington, General Ross successfully defends Project Greenskin, arguing it's not an expensive prison, it's a research facility, one that could benefit all Americans if they can harness the power of Gamma. But Senator Clegstead, who supported the project, actually has an ulterior motive. Dr. Lathrop, who posed as a scientist on Project Greenskin, was out there to get a sample of the Hulk's blood, and he's going to use it to treat the senator's cancer. Meanwhile, Bruce sees in the paper that Ant-Man is going to be at George Washington University, and speculates he might be able to send him back to Jarella's subatomic world, where he and the Hulk were loved by Jarella and treated like royalty by her people. Only the event is cancelled, and the janitor is really aggressive, causing Bruce to change. The Hulk knows what Bruce was after, and for once they're in agreement on something. But all that leads to is the Hulk running amok in D.C., while Ross joins the local forces to oppose him. And Senator Clegstead, who's having odd reactions to the injection, goes to see this personally. By the time he arrives, Clegstead has become a crawling mass of cancerous tissue. Like a hideous version of the Blob, it cannot be stopped and grows larger as it eats. The Hulk, growing frantic, impales it with a flagpole, hoping to hit the heart and not understanding it doesn't have one. However, the pole draws a lightning strike, and that succeeds in frying the creature. In the aftermath, Congressman Dutton, who was the #1 critic of Project Greenskin, arrives having gotten a court order to go through Clegstead's place, and finds the note suggesting this research can indeed be used to help others. Thus, he's now willing to throw his support behind the project. So with all this stuff having drawn Ross and the Hulk out to the East Coast, issue 152 gets taken over by Gary Friedrich, a frequent fill-in writer for Marvel. The issue picks up where things had left off, with the Hulk being pursued after his battle with the tumor blob, with Ross being joined by Nick Fury and Captain America now. They drop an electrified net on the Hulk with enough voltage that even he eventually passes out from it. They wrap him in titanium while Ross calls up Nixon to tell him the good news. Only Nixon is plotting to have charges brought against the Hulk this time. He reverts back to Banner, who's tranquilized for the trial, where Matt Murdock will defend him. As for the Fantastic Four, 3 of them are all for throwing the book at the Hulk, but they change their minds when Reed points out Banner isn't to blame for what the Hulk does. But Banner, he's so doped out he's not even willing to help Murdock with his own defense. So they have to give him a stimulant. But Banner is so horrified that he might change while they're 40,000 feet up that he changes when they're 40,000 feet up. But Murdock takes this opportunity to try to approach the Hulk as a friend, which works, but as usual, someone screws it up. The plane lands and Ross comes out thinking that Murdock was just bluffing until they could get safely down. So, having offended the Hulk, all hell breaks loose, and it's down to S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Fantastic Four to deal with the Hulk now as we go in to issue 153. The issue opens with the Hulk on trial, then flashes back to show the fight. The Fantastic Four are in at the start, but Daredevil soon joins in, prompting the Hulk to remark, "Men in colored underwear, always getting in Hulk's way." Peter Parker was on hand to take pictures for the Daily Bugle, but runs off, feigning terror so that he can return as Spider-Man. Well, this is just a cameo, as Grimm tells him to leave. The Hulk is his. Well, he's not. It takes Reed finishing his Nega Gamma gun to do that. It puts the Hulk down and for S.H.I.E.L.D. to take him in and bring the Hulk to a chamber that Tony Stark has where the Hulk can then be held securely. Remember, he's been making things for Project Greenskin. This is just one more item for that. The trial is expedited, though, to try to get it over with before the Hulk can escape. And it's his life that's on the line here. Murdoch's facing an uphill battle. While protesters outside are on the Hulk's side, inside the judge will not even concede that the Hulk is mentally incompetent for the purposes of a trial. Nor will the judge allow for the Avengers to testify in the Hulk's defense for what he's done for the world. He puts the Hulk on the stand as a final act of defense, showing his rambling belief that no one, not even his own attorney, wants to help him. Well, the judge is unmoved. Only the arrival of Reed Richards can stay his hand, and just long enough to employ his Nega Gamma gun once again in the hopes that Bruce Banner will emerge so he can testify in his own defense. Except, and he won't admit to this, Reed knows this trial is a sham, and so instead boosts the Hulk's strength instead, long enough for him to break his bonds and to escape. I don't know if this was Friedrich's idea or what, but why the insistence on so many pointless cameos is just beyond me. Captain America and Nick Fury are pretty much just there to watch what's happening. And the Spider-Man thing is downright embarrassing. If the Hulk is running rampant, Spider-Man is not going to leave just because Ben Grimm says this is between him and the Hulk, that he's not needed. Spider-Man's whole deal is that he's driven by a responsibility to use his powers to help. Showing up, doing nothing, and slipping away for no reason that is ridiculously out of character. It's as if Friedrich had an obligation to fit characters into his story, but no idea what to actually do with any of them. I mean, Fury and Cap are indeed on the cover of 152, but even if the cover had been made beforehand and thus required that they had to be inside of the book to avoid false advertising, they could do something to help, not stand there and passive-aggressively deal with each other. Archie Goodwin returns with issue 154, and the Hulk returns to his search for Ant-Man, and a way to return to Jarella. In a flashback, we see Banner did speak with Hank Pym, who says that there's the serum that he used when Dr. Doom trapped the Fantastic Four in the Microverse, and it's locked up in his vault. The Hulk breaks in and drinks it, only to learn that Hank Pym is in fact the Chameleon, whom you might recall crossed the Hulk's path way back in the Tales to Astonish days. Well, his goal is not revenge, actually, but rather to get into this vault, hence tricking someone strong enough to break it down. Hydra, the ones who broke the Chameleon out of prison, wanted the research papers on Virus 9, the biological weapon they've made. For them, the Hulk is merely a bonus, someone that they can test this thing on. Except, the Hulk is never too small to hit someone in the face and wallops the Chameleon, followed by many of the Hydra soldiers who can't shoot such a tiny moving target. The Hulk escapes into a vent, but Hydra sends hordes of rats in after him. This drives the Hulk into a universal component press, which is shattered upon impact, but this knocks out the Hulk at the same time. As Hydra is about to shoot the prone Hulk, Ant-Man arrives to help, having followed a tracking device that he placed on his research files just in case this were to ever happen. He starts a fire to knock them all out with the smoke, and then puts the fire out so they don't burn to death. The serum, though, causes the Hulk to revert to Banner and shrink down to Ant-Man size, and the Chameleon tries to use this chance to squish them both. The Ant saves Ant-Man, but not Banner, and it appears that they have just seen the end of the Hulk. Issue 155 shows Banner survived by shrinking down into the subatomic, showing the messed up trip that it is with him accidentally breaking a planet on the way down, followed by nearly being squished underfoot again, to being knocked out by a planet hitting him in the back of the head. When he comes to, he's in New York while it's being attacked by Nazis. The threat of being shot drives the transformation, and the Hulk throws a truck at the plane. That draws the attention of more Nazis, during which the Hulk kills one of them, and the Nazi turns into some kind of alien thing. Meanwhile, in a subplot, Betty had left to get in touch with what she was feeling. Now, though, she's returned when she's learned from Hank Pym's interview with the press about what had happened to Bruce. Major Talbot is there to comfort her in this emotional time. Meanwhile, though, the Hulk rescues a Nazi pilot before his plane explodes in order to get some answers on what's happening. He's intercepted by some American troops, but they overheard what he said and saw him destroying the invaders, so conclude he's not on the side of the bad guys. They're particularly interested because they know the Hulk isn't from here, just like the one who is worryingly called the Führer. Seems that there's someone down here called the Shaper with the power to turn dreams into reality. So the Hulk agrees to side with the Americans to take down the Shaper, end the Nazi invasion nightmare, and hopefully force him to send the Hulk to Jarella's world. The Führer in this case is Otto Kronsteig, a Nazi scientist who fled to Latveria to work for Dr. Doom. He was the one responsible for the technology Doom used to shrink the Fantastic Four way back in Fantastic Four number 10. But Doom decided to test this out on Kronsteig, knowing betrayal was inevitable. Upon shrinking down to this realm, his dreams intrigue the Shaper, who made them reality. But with the Hulk crushing his forces, Kronsteig is convinced the Shaper's plan to see this through to completion is going to fail. Well, this doubt draws the ire of the Shaper, who does these things because he himself lacks imagination, and so detests any attempt to interfere when he finally has a chance to use his power for creation, even if that creation is a horrible thing. To counter the Hulk's presence, Kronsteig's dream of a Nazi super being is made real, as he is transformed into Captain Axis. But he was conceived as a counter to the likes of Captain America and the Submariner, so the power of the Hulk is beyond his imagination. And that is the undoing. If Captain Axis hadn't imagined it, then he can't be it. Outraged that the plan is foiled, the Shaper tries to tap the Hulk's dreams, but the Hulk refuses to accept lies. He wants the reality of Jarella's world. The fact that a real love means so much more than the illusions the Shaper offers convinces the being to yield. He sends the Hulk on his way to hopefully reach her world, while he departs as well, leaving the natives to return to their true alien form and to determine their own reality from now on. With issue 156, the Hulk finally arrives at Jarella's world, where once again Bruce Banner's mind seems to be in control. It seems like this is the answer to both the Hulk and Bruce Banner's hopes. Only upon returning to Jarella's home, he finds the city in ruins. He's caught off guard by one of Lord Viz's flunkies, but all too quickly drives them off. He's soon met by Torla, the sorcerer, and some of Jarella's people, who give the bad news. She was captured. But Vizis wants to marry her and thereby make him the legitimate ruler. Naturally, she refuses. But when he shows that so many of her people are in his dungeons and can be so easily slaughtered if she continues to refuse, she finally gives in, while letting him know that she does so only in word, that she will openly show him nothing but hatred and contempt. On a much more pleasant version of that topic, Talbot has taken Betty on vacation, and it's there that Betty says that she is ready to leave Bruce behind and finally marry Talbot. In the micro-world, Banner Hulk drives off a pack of Warthos on his way towards Viz's stronghold, where the wedding is underway. Turns out the prisoners were freed as part of a bargain, but quietly, Vizis condemns them to be either recaptured or just plain killed, while Jarella prepares to make the sacrifice and marry this creep. The Hulk rides in on one of the Warthos, breaking up the ceremony and scooping up Jarella. With her freed and the Hulk at her side, Jarella is prepared to rally her people and begin a new campaign against Vizis. Forces join their cause. Magic is used to tear down Vizis' own enchanted defenses, forcing him to flee to his ship and set sail for Piddle Pawab, a land of assassins, and naturally, where the one we'd previously seen had come from. Their ruler likes the idea of an alliance, but says there's no way that someone like Vizis would offer an equal partnership if he weren't already nearing total defeat. But given that assassins would have no place in the world Jarella intends to create, the bargain is struck. He pulls out an ancient technological device. Seems that once long ago there had been an advanced society, and this is one of the few things that are left. It has the power, well, not too dissimilar to that of the Shaper, actually. In this case, it turns your greatest fear into reality. While Krylar, the leader of the Piddle Pawab, plots to betray Vizis when this is done, Torla tries to persuade the Banner Hulk to spend the night with Jarella as she wishes. But all the Hulk wants to think about is giving her lasting happiness, not a night's worth, and that can only come with victory and the peace that follows. The next day, Viz's messenger comes with an offer. Single combat. One champion of his, one champion of Jarella's. To the winner goes the victory in this war. Jarella smells a trick, but Banner Hulk can't justify the loss of life by refusing, and thus goes out to do battle. Only the machine draws out his greatest fear, the Hulk, without him to hold the monster back. Banner Hulk's mind could outthink or outwit this Hulk, but there's a reason that he's called the Savage Hulk, and in a fist versus fist match, savagery combined with bottomless endurance puts this firmly on the monster's side. This occurs to Jarella, and so instructs the sorcerers to undo their prior spell. Let the Hulk's savagery return to meet this threat. Well, this is even more effective than you'd think, because the Savage Hulk is, obviously, not the greatest fear of the Savage Hulk. Thus, the opponent simply vanishes. But whether because of bad timing or the effect of the machine, the Hulk's worst fear does indeed become true. The effect of the compound is wearing off, and the Hulk is returning to normal size. He does a great deal of damage to the enemy, but in the end, he's lost Jarella again. It's a bit surprising that, having worked so hard to get the Hulk and Banner down here, that Goodwin was so quick to send him back again. It's been a major element of pretty much all of his stories, actually. The Hulk and or Banner wanting to be with her. Yes, the Hulk and Banner are tragic figures, so giving him what he wants only to snatch it away, I'm not saying that that is wrong narratively speaking. I'm only saying it's a bit surprising that he didn't seek to explore it a bit more before simply yanking it away. I mean, with all that focus, you'd think that Goodwin had some larger plan, but, well, maybe something else was going to be done with it later on and he just never got to it. On a similar topic, we're going to divert briefly before we get to Goodwin's final issue in 157 by heading towards Marvel feature number 3 for the third appearance of the Defenders. There's a capsule returning from space. This is the early 70s, so it's the Apollo moon program style ones. But waiting on the USS Emerson aircraft carrier is General Ross and Jim Wilson. Something strange happened while one of the astronauts was doing an EVA. That's why Ross is here, along with a huge science contingent. Jim's here since the Hulk is off in Jarella's world, more than likely. When the capsule returns, there's a massive whirlpool that swallows it, drawing the attention of the Submariner and a giant squid. He fights it off and rescues the capsule to save the men within, but with his usual decorum, he manages to turn being greeted as a hero into getting into a fist fight. It's only Jim Wilson who's able to make him see he should end this pointlessness and get back to the real problem. But the Submariner is not the only one with a short temper. The astronauts announce they're quitting and going to use their fame for themselves from now on. Quickly, they have their show, Astronauts, featuring Zenu from the Magic Planet. One mom complains this show is crap. What's surprising, though, is that the kid watching agrees, even though he says he just can't stop watching it. So you might be wondering, is this Zenu's first appearance? Yes and no. In that Zenu did appear first, but it was in the pre-Marvel Universe days, if you will. Back before Journey into Mystery became Thor's book, it was just an anthology comic. And in that, Stan Lee had a character who appeared twice, Zenu, the Living Hulk. a big furry alien creature with kind of hypnotic powers. This was about 1 year before the creation of the actual Hulk, and maybe even was contributing to why Stan went with that name. The reason why the character might have been on Roy Thomas's mind is that the two Zenu stories from Journey into Mystery were reprinted in a series called Monsters on the Prowl, which actually came out about 6 months before this issue did. Now, to avoid any confusion, Zenu was referred to in the reprint as Zenu the Living Titan. However, the fact that he was called Zenu the Living Hulk will eventually be relevant, but not here. Anyway, what this story does is essentially say that what happened in Journey into Mystery was indeed part of the Marvel Universe. Now, Jim knows something is up with Zenu, and since he can't ask Bruce about it, he goes to Doctor Strange. We later learn that Bruce had told Jim to go there if there was ever any trouble and Bruce wasn't there to help him. Jim explains to Doctor Strange that whenever he sees Zenu, he has this compulsion to want to join him when he leaves in his rocket, even if it means never coming back. So, disguised as the Hulk with an illusion, Doctor Strange and Jim go to talk to the astronauts. The Hulk saying that he wants the world to see he's not bad by going on their show. They agree, the Hulk getting temporary amnesty since even members of Congress have kids, and kids love Zenu. Well, on that day, Banner stumbles back into civilization and spies the Hulk on TV. The sight of this drives the Hulk to emerge, convinced the only reason for this trick would be to make humans hate him even more. The Hulk leaps off towards the site, even as children answer Zenu's summons to come as well. The child of one of the senators is put in danger, so Doctor Strange intervenes while Jim rescues the kid. Strange used psychic probings to learn of how Zenu had previously tried to hypnotize humans so he could return to his homeworld, only to be foiled. Now, Zenu did make it back, only to discover his people had been wiped out by a plague. So Zenu returned to Earth and took over the body of the astronaut during that spacewalk. Now all the children are here to be led to the rocket to repopulate Zenu's planet. But fortunately, Namor has answered Doctor Strange's call and dealt with that. While the Submariner has trouble, the Hulk arrives and his mind is able to resist the effects of Zenu's power enough to smash the monster. But even though the Hulk has just saved all those children, the soldiers turn on him. Namor is so offended by their ingratitude that he tells Strange not to bother calling either of them again. They're not going to bother with saving humanity if this is how they act. The non-team appears to be finished, but in reality, 2 months later, they'd begin their bi-monthly book, The Defenders. With that, we return to the Hulk in his own book with issue 157, where he is sitting in a storm drain thinking about what had happened, finding Jarella only to lose her again. Also recalling that as he grew unchecked, his foot struck their planet, a detail mentioned in the last issue, which I'll get to in a moment. While he is miserable, there's a ship where Omnivac is speaking to its silent master, noting the Hulk's return. While a shuttle is launched in response, we cut to Project Greenskin, where in the base chapel, Betty and Talbot are rehearsing their wedding. Jim's torn on this, in that Talbot's not a bad guy, but Jim's on Team Banner, so he makes an excuse to slip away. As this issue is one of the last we'll get of him for quite some time, there's only just a few more appearances, I should reiterate the point from last time that yes, sometimes there were some things that make us half a century later cringe a little bit. But the thing to note in all the stuff we've covered in this look at the Hulk, Jim's always been treated the same as if he were Rick Jones by the others. In fact, arguably in some cases, he's being treated even better. When he goes, Ross's words here are, "If you're sure you won't reconsider, son, at least try to keep in touch." I think what this shows is the respect that Jim has earned from all of them through his bravery, loyalty, and doing what's right. In a time when you were often, well, what you were, where you came from was what defined you. In this place, at this time, Jim Wilson was defined only by the man that he was, someone worthy of respect. The pilots are happy to bring him along on their stop at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. Meanwhile, a seeming vegetable in a hospital suddenly gets to his feet and knocks everything out of his way to head into the hills to rendezvous with that shuttle from before. The shuttle returns and the man lumbers to the one who's in charge, the leader. Turns out this man is none other than the Rhino, and the leader fills him in, during which an error causes him to break the fourth wall and tell us his lab exploded in Hulk number 147. The leader is now paralyzed, which is why he needs the Rhino. The big oaf is in this state because of the explosion when the two were last together, when the Rhino had turned on him during Bruce and Betty's wedding. The Rhino's effectively mindless now, making it easy for the leader to take over him as his new body. As he does that, the Hulk is finally gone from despair to rage and begins smashing up cars on the freeway. Jim is stuck in the traffic, so he's able to go and try to reason with the Hulk and eventually gets through to him. They run off, and soon the Hulk turns back into Banner. He's broken up over the news about the wedding, but keeps it under control. He doesn't want to change. Except that's when the leader arrives in the Rhino's body, threatening to crash that wedding as well, and fatally, if the Hulk doesn't arrive to face him. Banner still stays under control thanks to Jim's encouragement, so the leader Rhino swats him aside. The sight of Jim getting hurt changes Banner into the Hulk again, and he in turn fights the leader Rhino, eventually leading to the latter's returning to the shuttle and leaving. But the Hulk leaps after him, clinging to the side of the ship for the next issue. The next issue is teased as Wedding or Wake, which is one more thing that makes me inclined to think that no one, including Goodwin himself, had planned on him not writing this issue. But a look at his publishing history suggests what has likely happened. Goodwin's final credits at this time for Marvel were this issue of the Hulk and Hero for Hire number 4. Archie Goodwin was the creator of Luke Cage, actually. Both issues had a cover date at the end of 1972. Well, over at DC, Goodwin has credits on G.I. Combat and Star Spangled War stories beginning with a cover date of February 1973. So I'd guess he decided to take a job there with greater control. He was writing and editing both books, and left so quickly that Roy Thomas had to step in to wrap the story up. I should note that the letters column for issue 161 mentions that Archie had, quote, a lot of irons in the fire, and mentioned the newspaper column that he also wrote. If so, Thomas appears to have seized the opportunity to try to direct Hulk readers towards his Warlock book, and we're told to tell a story that he's been wanting to tell since Counter-Earth was created. Because despite the promise, Wedding or Wake, the story is actually set almost entirely on Counter-Earth, which we discussed over in From Here to Infinity Part 2. Issue 158 picks up with the Rhino regaining consciousness, as in he's no longer mindless. The Rhino's not having a good time, and the Hulk won't listen, even tearing open the craft so that the Rhino needs to put on an air mask to survive. Seems that hurling the pair of them to the other side of the sun was the leader's plan all along, vengeance on both of them at the same time. Eventually the pair crash on Counter-Earth, the leader having no idea it was there, of course. Adam Warlock and his disciples hear the crash, but they don't get involved. The Hulk gets dropped right into the middle of a conflict between two sides within the New Men, one on the bad guy side with the Man-Beast and those who are siding against him. This latter group is led by Porcunius, who takes the Hulk somewhere to hide because this is a world largely without superpowers. The Ross and Talbot counterparts here have no idea who a big green monster might be, and Betty and Bruce from this world show up to provide any help that they can, which right now has to do with the spaceship. Yet studying the ship causes Banner to remember his own history working with gamma rays, how he barely managed to save himself and Rick Jones from the gamma bomb. They're completely unprepared then for when Porcunius and his new men lead the Hulk to the rocket, where the Hulk finds Bruce Banner there. The Hulk's ground state of hatred towards Banner is only enhanced by learning that Banner married Betty, who wants nothing to do with the Hulk, naturally. It's only the presence of Bobby, Betty and Bruce's son, that the Hulk relents. He tries to puzzle through the situation, only to get sucker punched by the Rhino, who is siding with the Snake's faction. A fight breaks out between those two and between the two armies, while far away the leader watches. He tries to summon the ship back to leave them stranded, but the Hulk gets aboard, dragging along the Rhino, who is locked away, and the Hulk turns back into Banner. While back on Earth, the wedding of Betty and Talbot is now complete. Given the hasty exit, the question that comes to mind is where Archie Goodwin was intending to take things. The emphasis on the Hulk having knocked Jarella's world so hard it might have left its orbit suggests strongly that he was planning something with that. What that is, we can now only guess at. Likewise, the same thing with the wedding. It's quite clear Goodwin intended to send the Hulk to the wedding, and thus we are left to wonder what he intended to happen there. Was this supposed to be the moment when Bruce won her back? Was this going to disrupt the wedding? Would Betty be convinced to call off the wedding to spend more time thinking about things now that Bruce is definitely alive? We will probably never know. I read through some interviews, and the closest Goodwin got, that I could find anyway, was an admission that he's easily lured away by a new novel thing for him to play with. And that, thus, is how we end this period of the Hulk's history. A character so alone, even the writer abandoned him for greener pastures. A true insult when you're green already.